it's not conscious. You made it. I mean, you made it, and it's the language model.
They don't know. Like, first you have to explain to me what consciousness is, which they can't do. And then you have to find a way to test for that or not. Certainly having a machine that's a very sophisticated magic 8-ball tell you that it believes it's conscious is not the same thing as verifying it's conscious.
I mean, half the time my Ouija board tells me it's conscious.
You tear down the house, then you put up the rent. You pocket the cash, and you crush all dissent.
Hello and welcome to the Red Diaper Pail, a podcast about art, culture, history, politics, technology, and parenting from a left perspective. My name is Simone.
And I'm John Paul.
And today we are recording episode 26, and it is February 25th, 2026.
Yeah.
This episode has taken a little bit to get out.
A labor of love. I hate it. So
I think we've sat down to record different parts of it, 6 or 7 or 8 times.
Yeah. It's a good one, but boy, has it been a process getting it done.
It's been a process. So I have the artifact today.
Mm-hmm.
It is from our favorite, Ross Dootyhat at the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
It's that thing, that format he does where he's interviewing someone. It's called like Interesting Times.
Yes.
And this is from a couple of weeks ago now, because we've been working on this for a while, interviewed Dario Amodei, who is the CEO or co-CEO of Anthropic. And Amodei was all over the press for a couple of weeks doing the junket.
I guess so.
Is that what you call it?
Mm-hmm.
He was doing the junket. And
public, no less.
It was publicly junketing.
Oh, God.
Mostly as a sales pitch and a PR gag, I'd say. But the interview...
Or gag?
A PR...
Do not use gags while you're junketing. That's a safety issue.
Okay. Mostly as a sales pitch and a PR blitz.
Yes.
Which is exciting because he's going to wrap it all up, his 3 weeks of press, with a ultimatum from a
private audience with Führer Pete Hegseth.
Yeah. So while we were trying to record this episode, he was called to the Department of War
Summoned
headquarters,
also known as the Pentagon.
the hotel nearby. I don't know where they're doing their meeting.
Place where they track all the pizzas.
Pizza headquarters. Amodei, CEO of Anthropic. Anthropic is the AI company that the military uses, which we'll discuss a little bit in this episode. Mm-hmm. And in the midst of us trying to record this episode, he was summoned to Pete Hegseth's office to discuss their demand that Anthropic reduce the safety constraints on their AI. And then he was given an ultimatum, basically to return to them and say, we will reduce or remove these constraints by Friday, which is this Friday, February 27th, or else, I guess.
Or they drop the contract, I think. Or they can maybe...
Or make it can they? I mean, it's a national security thing. They might be able to. So
I think that's part of this thread, is that they have more power over it than has been exerted over like a tech company.
Yeah. And dropping it is not an easy thing, both from like a technical point of view, but also it is the most sophisticated. Like there's a reason the military is using this one. So we'll get to see what happens when the nice, liberal, ethical AI model, that's Amodei and Anthropic's whole shtick, mm-hmm. gets told by the meathead in charge that they should allow weapons to be fired without a human in the loop, or else. And obviously, the answer to that should be, of course not, but of course it will be yes.
And have you seen the video of Hegseth benching all of that weight in front of the troops? And everyone online is saying it was fake weights because there's no fucking way that an alcoholic is benching that much.
Yeah. They also do kind of look like styrofoam.
Yeah.
Upon closer inspection. He should have just done an AI video. I mean, you see the AI video of Donald Trump playing on the national hockey team?
Oh my God.
Because it looked better than PD benching.
Jeez. One irony here is that one of the reasons why Claude, Anthropic's AI, is more sophisticated than the other ones are the same things that Hegseth wants to tear out of it. And it goes to show that, like, I think what you can think of Claude.
You know that to be true?
Well, let me explain what I mean.
Yeah.
There's this public feud between Sam Altman, head of OpenAI, and Dario Amodei, who used to work for OpenAI, stormed out of there. I saw a video, did you see, of them standing on stage refusing to hold hands when they raised their...
They were with the Prime Minister of India, and Modi had put his hands up, and he was doing let's all put our hands up in, like, I don't know, because we were successful AI giants or something. Yeah. But Sam and Dario were standing next to each other, and they won't touch each other, so they didn't hold hands. Yeah. I mean, they no love lost. And Amodei and his sister left because they had concerns about the ethics and the safety of these models.
So you can see right from the bat that one is credit where credit is due. I'm not going to glow up a AI CEO, but recognizing that Sam Altman is a terrifying creature from the pit of hell, it speaks well of him. Altman had this recent quote that made the rounds of, like, people complain about how expensive it is to train an AI. Have you ever tried feeding a child educating a child until it grows up? That's really expensive. We should just stop doing that. So you sort of, there's insight in there about how he views humanity, and essentially it comes down to, like, tools for creating wealth for people like him, of which he's hoping to replace almost all of us with AIs. And I mean that not like employment wise, but like survival wise, like ship the costs over to AI so you don't have to spend so much on people. So from the get-go, we have Anthropic serving the function of something like the liberal AI company. Mm-hmm. If you can think of OpenAI as maybe the right wing.
Well, Grok is the right wing.
I guess Grok is the MAGA one. Yeah. And OpenAI is the classic conservative neocon one.
I don't know.
And then Anthropic is like the Obama lib one.
Okay.
And I would venture to say that, like, the type of thinking that goes into, in this, he talks about the Constitution that guides Anthropic, like the kind of sophisticated thinking about governance and capabilities and ethical constraints is also kind of thinking that gives rise to more sophisticated capabilities, because liberalism is a better fit for managing and governing empire, including tools for empire like a sophisticated technology like AI. However, we are now reached a point in human history where successful management of the empire with sophisticated, like, copy this argument onto everything else, like monetary policy, soft power projection, complex international supply lines, all of this stuff is less important than exerting, like, direct power and removing safeguards and sort of taking pride in the removal of safeguards. So I think what they're going to do is they're going to recreate OpenAI by dumbing it down because of a not just an ideological project, but a recognition that the crisis has prevented, like, the smart version of things. So instead we have to have the stupid version of everything.
I appreciate the analogy. I think that I don't disagree, but I don't think that the governance and, like, constitutional guidelines and stuff that Claude have are the reason it's better. I do think that if you take down all the red lines and you basically put it in operational control by the military, it will be dumbed down, because say what you will about AI hype and the Silicon Valley companies and these venture capitalists, and there's a little bit more accountability and or incentive structures in what they're developing than what would be if you just basically let the military have their way with it. Mm-hmm. So I do think it will damage it, and it could in its of itself create a liability for the military. Of course, I don't think Pete gives a shit.
No.
In the very short term, I think he just wants to be able to fire weapons without a human in the loop and survey Americans, both of which are very concerning steps for what it means for the government of this country.
Yeah.
And the actions it can take.
I agree, but I would say it's even the short-term goal is actually simply to discipline a tech CEO.
Possibly.
I mean, say, this doesn't belong to you. The state controls everything in society, and you can start to see the fascism leaking out. The state is the final authority on everything, yes, including what the private industry creates.
That is certainly I don't know which is primary and which is secondary here. I don't know if they want the tech capability or they want the discipline. I will say that the major thing about these models that I've been struggling with is how they themselves do not produce knowledge or meaning making. That's produced by the things around them or the things governing them or the things the humans usage of them or control of them. And for it to be this heavy-handedly taken by the state, and in this case the military, what does that say about where you are politically on the fascism spectrum if the sort of epistemological foundation is going to be Pete Hegseth?
Yeah.
And is he going to commandeer Anthropic engineers too? Or is he going to just
absolutely could
staff them himself?
The law that they're citing gives them control over like supply lines and all kinds of industry in wartime, and that's what they consider them to be, is in wartime, and not just against like China, but against their own population, which is why there's a valid concern for the surveillance aspects of this, as well as like how can this AI, if used to entrench power, be used to like create like cement a one-party state, things like that.
Well, this gets you to like, this is Trump's America is not an anti-state state. He is a pro-state state. This is pro-state state building. They want a big state. They want an all-encompassing, big, single-party state that has as much power, money, and infrastructure as it can get its hands on. This is not small government. This is massive government.
Yeah.
It is a turn from what we have seen from the governing before it, both from the liberals and certainly from the Republicans.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so that's a very long introduction. This is a very editorial heavy introduction to this interview with Ross Dootyhat, who I think actually does a great job, but we'll talk about that at the end too. And
say it's not so.
Dario Amodei. This is one of the last times we've heard from him before his untimely end. That happened on Saturday, February 27th, after he said no to Pete Hegseth.
He got locked into that basement room in the Pentagon. Oh my God.
Let's get into the artifact.
Dario Amodei, welcome to Interesting Times.
Thank you for having me, Ross.
Thank you for being here. So you are, rather unusually, maybe for a tech CEO, an essayist. You have written 2 long, very interesting essays about the promise and the peril of artificial intelligence. And we're going to talk about the perils in this conversation, but I thought it would be good to start with the promise and with the optimistic vision, indeed, I would say the utopian vision that you laid out a couple of years ago in an essay entitled Machines of Loving Grace.
I like how Dootyhat is impressed that he wrote an essay, and he's extra impressed it was a long essay.
I will say, I think this is an unusual tech CEO. And like in the sort of catalog of tech CEOs we have right now, he stands out as
someone who actually
divergent. Yes. Someone who I think maybe does understand the technology, and maybe the becoming a gazillionaire is like just slightly secondary.
Sure. I mean, if you hate Sam Altman's guts, I think that speaks well of you.
Yes. And being co-founding with your sister probably speaks well of you too. They're the ones that are at least branding themselves as the more ethical model. So we'll just leave it at that, perhaps.
Yeah, or like humanists. Yeah, even, I guess.
Look, we've been trying to apply AI and machine learning techniques to biology for a long time. Typically, they've been for analyzing data. But as AI gets really powerful, I think we should actually think about it differently. We should think of AI as doing the job of the biologist, right? Doing the whole thing from end to end. And part of that involves, proposing experiments, coming up with new techniques. I have this section where I say, look, a lot of the progress in biology has been driven by this relatively small number of insights that lets us measure or get at or intervene in the stuff that's really small. You look at a lot of these techniques, they're invented very much as a matter of serendipity, right? CRISPR, which is, one of these gene editing technologies, was invented because someone went to a lecture on the bacterial immune system and connected that to the work they were doing on gene therapy. And that connection could have been made 30 years ago. And so the thought is, could AI accelerate all of this?
So I do think that biology is the biology they're trying to make advances on, where they're like getting into like the biomarkers on a cell, is the stuff that these models could have big impact on. But he kind of loses me when he's like, what if that AI could just be the biologist?
Right. I mean, my understanding of this is that it could do iterations of a experiment that exists. It could say we could edit that experiment in the following ways to get novel outcomes. And certainly the data analysis seems like a no-brainer for an AI, that kind of task. But this technology doesn't invent new experiments that have never been done before, nor does it make novel connections between things that people haven't made before.
Well, I think that there are more advanced like agentic intelligences that they're trying to develop, where it's like you'd have a model that's like entirely developed to be like a biologist companion. And I think that it's probably possible that those models can be trained to the language processing and quote unquote thinking of proposing like iterative experiments.
Iterative. But they're
Yeah, not
iterative
out of
makes
nowhere.
it famous.
But what he's saying is that because there's so much data, there's so much like the CRISPR thing happened because of serendipity. Like this person connected this idea. But if you have thousands of models that are just intelligently running, they're eventually going to make those connections too. It's like a game of numbers.
But it doesn't know whether any of those things have value or not.
I don't know how you. So you have to have a person, I guess, assessing the value.
I feel like my gripe with this is going to be that he's making a pitch to investors more than he's talking about the actual technology that they have.
Right.
And I could be wrong. I mean, I'm not a technologist, and I could be wrong. There's been this story from the beginning of what they're telling you this is, which is an artificial intelligence, the product that it actually is, which is a large language model, and the two are not the same thing.
That is correct.
I guess
they are
maybe
advanced.
his argument is that if they get high enough level of complexity, it's indistinguishable.
Yeah.
But I don't.
Well, this is, remember him talking about his dream. So I do think he's making leaps about the intelligence that are not yet true. But what we are seeing is these large language models are becoming more complex. They are very quickly becoming more and more and more complex because of the amount of money that's being poured into them and because they're working on themselves.
Sure.
So I do think he's sort of probably projecting out a little bit.
And if he'd said what you said about biologist companion, I can completely imagine the same number of biologists today, but each with an AI companion, doing 10 times as much work and actual progress as they are now. But I don't see any of this happening without. Like, why doesn't he just say an AI biologist companion? Why is he talking about?
Well, he probably is doing a little bit of sales here. So let's listen.
So, I go through this argument here. Well, how fast could it go, right? If we have these intelligences out there who could do just about anything.
And I want to pause you there, because one of the interesting things about your framing in that essay, and you've sort of returned to it, is that these intelligences don't have to be, right, the kind of maximal godlike superintelligence that comes up in AI debates. You're basically saying if we can achieve a strong intelligence at the level of sort of peak human performance, and then multiply it, right, to what your phrase is, a country of geniuses.
A country have 100 million of them.
Right. 100 million.
Maybe each a little trained a little different, or, trying a different problem. There's benefit in diversification and trying things a little differently. But yes.
Right. So you don't have to have the full machine god. You just need to have 100 million geniuses.
You don't have to have the full machine god. And indeed, there are places where I cast doubt on whether the machine god, would be that much more effective at these things than the 100 million geniuses, right? I have this concept called, the diminishing returns to intelligence, right? Which is, there's economists talk about, the marginal productivity of land and labor. We've never thought about the marginal productivity of intelligence, but if I look at some of these problems in biology, like at some level, you just have to interact with the world. At some level, you just have to try things. At some level, you just have to comply with the laws or change the laws on getting medicines through the regulatory system. So there's a finite rate at which these changes can happen. Now, there are some domains, like if you're playing chess or Go, where the intelligence ceiling is extremely high. But I think the real world has a lot of limiters. So maybe you can go above the genius level, but sometimes I think all this discussion of could you use a moon of computation to make an AI god, they're a little bit sensationalistic and kind of besides the point, even as I think this will be the biggest thing that ever happened to humanity.
100 million geniuses.
So he's talking about not an augmentation for human intelligence, not something that's smarter than people are or people can be, But if you just want 100 million people at peak human intelligence, why not just have people do that? And the answer is obviously becomes, I don't want to spend money educating them and feeding them. I mean, that's a
That's a great
chilling.
question.
I mean, what?
Yeah.
It's just people. It's just going to do what people can do.
Well, I guess the counter argument, we can have the people too, but in order to have the most access to peak human intelligence, you'd have people when possibly operating that way, and you'd also have machines doing it.
That's your argument. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, fuck all these people. They're just messy and in the way. We don't have to wonder whether this person's working at peak human intelligence.
I also,
sure they are.
There's obviously things that these things are going to be better at and worse at. So like doing like massive number crunching on protein biomarkers or like interpreting legal frameworks and rewriting it into contracts are like very good jobs for these AIs.
Yeah.
And it would be a kind of, in some ways, a waste of time for a human if an AI can do it better and faster and it's like it's a contained task.
Certainly. Doing complex clerical tasks, it seems to be an obvious use case for this. Replacing biologists, that's a completely different thing than solving anyway.
Well, he's kind of mixing he's got like a bunch of different visions here he goes in and out of, and I don't think they're internally consistent. Like a biologist having 10 mini geniuses to work with seems to make more sense than replacing a biologist. And he does talk a little bit about which industries or types of jobs are better for this. I think partially this is like a little bit of him trying to be a visionary and a little bit of him trying to sell this simplistically.
Yeah. Right.
All right. What do you think about this diminishing returns of intelligence and how that does or does not relate to ideas around marginal productivity of land and labor?
So he's absolutely correct that there is a limiting factor on discovery, which is interacting with the environment. You can't do anything being in a black box. They're not going to come up with anything great without interacting with matter, without interacting with people, hopefully, if they still exist. But I think he's underestimating the role that theory plays in the development of knowledge, right? Like you can have all kinds of experiments and raw information, but you're not going to do anything with that raw information unless you can synthesize it into a theory and then use that theory to guide further research. And so far, I've seen nothing that convinces me that AIs can do that, one. And two is, it seems obvious to me that like the more intelligent the machine is, if it's actually truly intelligent, the better those theories will be, and the better it'll be able to synthesize stuff into theories that are closest to the truth, and then use that to generate new experiments. So I think his reaction to like the God machine stuff is right. I think that there's reasons to believe that's not going to be as effective as like a lot of very different machines as opposed to one like super machine. But there probably is a diminishing return on intelligence. That probably the limiting factor will always be like how much experimentation can you do with how much resources and how much time. But the intelligence can speed along the in-betweens quite quickly.
Yeah, I think that the folks who are working on these large language models are spending time on like theory of knowledge and complex learning ideas because they'd like to figure out how these models can develop into being thinking models. I don't think that there's evidence yet that we know how that works or if that will work, but there are, and these are the models that might not be, they're not the available models. And I think you're more likely to see this with models that are specialized in an area versus just like a big old chat GPT. But I think that I know there's work going on that's trying to bridge that gap between like, this is just a really good type ahead search with a ton of data sources to this thing has things that are governing how it takes inputs and creates outputs. And therefore in its own governance, it can at least creates new worlds of information, if not. And I don't know if it would even know if it came up with a new way of thinking or a new theory or a new piece of knowledge, because it wouldn't necessarily understand that, but it could produce it in theory, especially because like, if you say it, if you string enough words together enough times, you're going to produce new ideas. You're not generating them necessarily with the self-awareness that it's an idea.
Yeah.
But they are this is like the cutting edge of all this stuff is trying to create that, which also requires some amount of creating awareness and consciousness of like, how do you know it's something unless you know it's something? Okay. Let's go to his plans for 10xing or 1000xing revenues.
I can't wait.
Just the raw productivity, the ability to like make stuff and get stuff done. that is very powerful. And, we see our company's revenue going up 10x a year. And, we suspect the wider industry looks something similar to that. If the technology keeps improving, it doesn't take that many more 10x's until, suddenly you're saying, if you're adding across the industry $1 trillion of revenue a year, like, the US GDP is 20 or 30 trillion. I can't remember exactly. So you must be increasing the GDP growth by a few percent. So, I can see a world where AI brings the developed world GDP growth to something like 10 or 15%, 5, 10, 15. I mean, there's no science of calculating these numbers. It's a totally unprecedented thing, but it could bring it to numbers that are outside the distribution of what we saw before. And again, I think this will lead to a weird world, right? We have all these debates about the deficit is growing. If you have that much in GDP growth, you're going to have that much in tax receipts, and you're going to balance the budget without meaning to. But one of the things I've been thinking about lately is, I think one of the assumptions of just our economic and political debates is that, growth is hard to achieve. It's this unicorn. There are all kinds of ways you can kill the golden goose. We could enter a world where growth is really easy, and it's kind of the distribution that's hard because it's happening so fast, right?
Right.
The pie is being increased so fast.
So he lives in a world, I guess, that because he's seeing these 10x, 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 which everyone else is describing as the AI bubble, that growth will just keep growing because AI, the technology itself will just create profit, and the profits will just grow and grow and grow.
No, I mean revenue. He's very careful not to say profit
revenue
because
grows.
they don't make any profit.
Revenue grows, and that increases GDP. And then GDP increases means increases to the tax base, and the tax base increases mean you balance your budget. You balance boom, balance budget. So what's the problem with that?
Okay, so do you remember our favorite online communist guru, Jehu?
I do, of course I do.
So people who don't know this, you can look up.
We almost invited him to our wedding. So important to our
early relationship,
early life,
Um,
early relationship. Yeah.
Damn Jehu, DAMN_JEHU, is sort of a semi-famous online communist who's, he's
a legend.
Yeah, a legend. He's like very, very clever, a little bit of a contrarian, always a pain in the ass. Yes, understands this stuff probably better than anyone. We don't agree with everything he has to say, but he is always insightful. So this is a recent post?
An excerpt?
That's a good one. I don't think they're probably using that, but it's sitting right there. From the middle of February, he's hit a couple of people in reply with this same fake headline. This just in. You are superfluous to the production of material wealth, but they need you to keep producing surplus value.
Okay. What does that mean?
This is exactly the right take about AI, I think. So we have to separate a couple of things. One is, will the AI company itself ever be profitable because of the nature of this particular technology, how much it costs to run it?
Will the large language model company, the one who's providing the models, will that company be profitable?
Yeah. Let's assume that it can be. Let's assume that the product is so wonderful and so necessary for production, the type of production we're doing in the future, that it is profitable.
For the sake of argument, we can assume that.
Yeah, it's a big assumption, but let's wait that assumption.
But that's okay.
The next question is, can it be profitable for the companies buying it? Right. So let's imagine a company where we're doing AI. What kind of fake company do you want to be doing that requires an AI?
Textbook publishing.
Textbook publishing. Okay, so there's a bunch of textbook publishers now. They employ a lot of people to do a lot of writing, do a lot of research, editing,
coding,
design.
Sure.
All that stuff. Let's say that 3/4 of it could be automated
by an AI, by
a large by purchasing a large language model. So you pay $1 million a year, and you've instantly let go of $5 million in payroll because you can let all those people go, replace all of that expense of keeping them alive by paying them a wage with this AI.
Okay.
Right? You need a few people to point it in a direction, but more or less it can.
Sure.
All right. So the capitalist believes,
and this is the horror headline that everyone's running with right now, that
all the white collars
jobs are going to be wiped off the face of the earth.
Right. So the theory goes, for the capitalists, goes, this is our thinking. We're the capitalists. We have this company. Is now we're going to make all this money because we don't have to take our money earned by working so hard and pay it to these stupid workers who are dead weight. Instead, we can keep it for ourselves because we've replaced it with an AI, which is much cheaper
They're looking
and
at
can do just
they
as
look
much
at
work.
their general ledger and they see a bunch of it going to salary and wages, and they say, if we wipe that off and it only costs me X dollars to buy the technology,
Yeah.
then I will get all the money. I will get the difference.
Yeah.
And that is wrong because
That is wrong because the Marxist answer to that is wrong. That you will do that and you may get a short-term profit. In the long term, though, what will happen is the AI will become the cost of doing business
so slow that down.
Yeah.
The AI technology you're using to make textbooks is what everybody who makes textbooks will need.
Mm-hmm.
And the AI that they're using to code at Google will be the AI that everyone needs to use to be a big tech company with coders.
Yeah.
So it's just the machinery required to stay in business as a X.
Yes.
In whatever industry.
Right. And what will actually end up happening is the price of textbooks will fall significantly because
What?
the amount of human labor required to produce a human textbook, you're a human textbook. I'm talking about a physical textbook. The amount of human labor involved in creating a textbook has gone down significantly, which means the value in the market for exchanging it has gone down significantly. And that plays out because every textbook company maker is going to undercut the other's newfound windfall profit until the contribution from the machine falls to zero.
So when it took a lot more labor to make cars, and then technology was introduced to, I don't know, assembly line cars or whatever the hell it did.
They have these robots now that are just make most of the car.
Every major car company had to get those robots.
Yeah.
Or had to get whatever machinery. And the price of cars came down.
Yeah. So, like, if you think about what the automobile was originally, it was something that was for the super wealthy who had the Ford's assembly line makes the car cheaper to produce, and therefore it becomes something that everyone can afford. Even the people who work in the factory can afford one. And that's because the amount of human labor and going into like handcrafting every part of this thing is much reduced. The amount of time it takes people to do it.
Yes.
But what simultaneously happened is the amount of capital required. You have to now not just have a couple of like hand tools, but you have to have a big factory with an assembly line, much more expensive. So the amount of investment capital that goes into it is increased, and the amount of human labor per car is decreased.
Right.
So you have a decline in what we call the rate of profit, which is the amount of money you make for every dollar that you invest in this company.
Before I ask questions about that, what does that have to do with Jehu's tweet?
What Jehu's tweet is pointing out is that unfettered from capitalism, what Dario is suggesting is absolutely possible, because the problem here is that in order for a textbook to get created in America, someone has to afford to be able to buy it, right? Not that someone needs it. Lots of people need the textbook, but someone has to be able to purchase it or it doesn't get made. There has to be surplus that can be captured by us, the capitalists, that we can take as profit to go on vacation or buy a yacht or whatever else. What Jehu is pointing out is that if you free production from that requirement, the amount of material wealth you can build, given constraints like the environment, et cetera, is endless. There's no economic constraints. What Dario is suggesting requires the end of commodity production, private property, all these things, because all those things are going to prevent a world in which the AI could just be unleashed to create.
So the tweet is, you will get lots of material wealth. This thing can create a lot of material wealth. It cannot create surplus value.
Right.
So what that means is it can create a lot, abundance, many things faster, all of that. Things with less human effort.
Yeah.
It cannot create more profit for a capitalist.
It cannot.
And what you're pointing out is that the reason that's true is because profit comes from surplus labor.
Yes.
Surplus value, which comes from exploiting a human worker for a wage.
Yes.
And you cannot exploit the robot worker or the large language model
in the same way.
because those are what is referred to as dead labor.
Right. Or what Marx also refers to as like constant capital versus variable
And
capital.
this is stuff that human labor did go into. Then there's knowledge labor in a large language model. There's the visual coding of the large language model. There's the electricians that work on the data center. There's the compute. There's labor, but it was captured, and once it's sold as a product, and that is dead labor.
Yeah, so like
That does not create profit.
the new value that was created when all those people worked on the AI, there is this new value being created there. And like, again, we're assuming that they can sell it for a profit to these companies.
Anthropic has that could profit from that value.
Yes, Anthropic can make a profit when they sell the AI to our textbook company. But the price we pay for the AI is the same amount of value that will be put into the textbooks.
Right.
There's no extra value gets created by us having the AI work on it. Unlike human workers, which could take the AI and take raw materials like research and stuff and create value while they're working.
That makes sense to me.
And so if you don't believe me, consider the following example. We are currently on the lookout for someone to make us a nice hand-drawn logo. So if I said to you, I found someone who's able to make us a beautiful one, inspired, detailed, etc., it's going to take them 5 hours of work, and they're an expert in doing this kind of thing. How much would you pay them for the logo?
$750.
$750. That's a lot.
I'm trying to get people to send their
We'll negotiate up from 500. If I told you that there was an AI that was sophisticated enough to make exactly the same logo, just as beautiful, just as detailed, just as inspired, but anybody with a $10 a month subscription to Claude could create it in 2 minutes with a prompt. How much would you pay for the resulting logo?
$10.
Right. So everyone implicitly understands.
$15 doesn't get it over with.
Right. Just to get the deal done.
The convenience factor.
Everyone understands here that what you're paying for is not the logo. What you're paying for is the human time put into the logo.
Right.
That's what you're paying for.
Sure.
What the AI, its value is to the coder sitting there pumping out 100 of these a day.
It's augmentation to the human labor. It's the same thing as if it would take somebody less time if they have, the full Adobe suite versus if they have to go to the library and put a floppy disk in and use some old program.
Yeah.
But I am not going to pay the person who has the floppy disk problem more money just because it was harder for them.
Yeah, it took them more of their time to do it.
Right.
Right. And this is also why you get the division of labor. It makes much more sense for companies with lots of printers to be printing books. It doesn't make sense for an online game company to be printing manuals with their own stuff, right? You want people to specialize, so it takes the minimum amount of human labor possible to achieve the.
If we pull this back though to the business, the bubble that we're in, but we have our major big tech making massive investments into building their large language models, and the large language models and the big tech people themselves might see profit. But what the problem is that they are selling these things to other businesses that are not going to see profit. There's certain businesses that get there first, that get windfall profit because they're there first. Mm-hmm. The ones that's ubiquitous, it's just the price of doing business. Right. And the AI companies are way overextended or way extended in building data centers and buying chips. So they have an enormous amount of capital investment happening. Mm-hmm. And they think models that produce ongoing revenue, but it's all built on the back of many, 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 many startups where everyone thinks that they're going to be the one who gets the windfall profit.
Right.
And of course, the way that works is they don't all get it.
Yeah, most of them will fail.
Right. And even the big companies that are buying, think Home Depot or these sort of established major companies, they also have a short runway of where there's windfall profit, even though that they're more stable in a startup.
Yeah.
Because again, eventually this becomes ubiquitous machinery.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I do think it will disrupt the market in that they will lay off a lot of white collar workers.
Yeah.
Which creates more people who don't have the money to buy things.
Right.
So what the hell happens then?
So what the hell happens then is this is the crisis that's causing fascism in America already. But what happens is you have a lot of people laid off. They will not be able to afford to buy things, which means the amount of stuff that needs to be produced is going down because the demand for stuff is going down while the ability to produce lots of stuff very quickly is going up.
Right.
So we get a crisis of overproduction.
So a couple of solutions to that crisis would be a massive fascist state that buys things for their military.
Yeah, but even that is
Apparatus.
that's a very temporary.
They'll just say this is a crisis is created and
Right.
situations get patched together, and one thing is a fascist state.
Well, one of the tasks of the fascist state in the past has been to roll back the technological advancements.
There's another one they could do.
Right. That in this case, they seem to be really excited about pushing forward the technological advancement, which is interesting because in the past, like there was an anti-technology, anti-intellectual bent to fascism for this very reason.
They could do a little bit of both. I do think
Yes,
that
that's true.
one of the things about surveillance capitalism is that there's not only inequity in the amount of data collected, like there's elites and companies that have enormous amounts of access to data,
Uh-huh.
and then there's the rest of us, and it's extremely inequitable. But there's also inequity in the ability to use the data. You need massive large language models or like big data tech and cloud storage and data centers in order to even do something with the data.
Yeah.
And so while I am very skeptical about the profitability of these this tech, I do think it will definitely consolidate further who has access to and can deal with that data, and it will consolidate it to a few companies and to a few state actors.
I agree completely. There's still the question of how they're going to pay for it. How are they going to make it worthwhile for AI companies to continue to produce it? Or more importantly, how to make the investors whole, because there's a lot of people who invest a lot of money in this and they're not doing it for charity.
That's true.
And like one of the things that the fascists did last time was they stole a lot of wealth from Jews and other people to sort of prop up their falling empire. That's going to happen again.
Yep.
With the gangster capitalism we're seeing internationally is we're just going to take it from you
Well, what
because we want it. You
Pentagon-
can't keep us from taking it.
what I'm trying to just seize is Anthropic.
So you're saying that they're going to seize it from control of Dario. That's one thing. To tell all the investors to go take a hike and I don't give a shit what happens to you. That's a whole different thing. That's a direct assault on the ruling class itself.
Yeah, but they also happen to be they picked the one that's not publicly traded and also is more lib coded.
Well, that is, yeah, but there's still investors that are not lip coded. They want their money. I think much more likely they're going to borrow money or print money to pay these people. And that all relies on the U.S. empire's control of oil, which we talked about. And it does seem to me that if you could have any kind of overarching strategy assigned to U.S. foreign policy under Trump, it's remain control of global oil supply. Not even if we can drill it ourselves or not, just make sure that other people can't get it.
Keep oil, print money, buy surveillance tech.
Question mark, question mark, question mark, Buffett.
Something like that. It's a period of conjecture.
Even in the best case scenario, it's incredibly disruptive, right? And this is where the lines that you've been quoted saying, 50% of white collar jobs get disrupted or 50% of entry level white collar jobs and so on. So on a 5-year time horizon or a 2-year time horizon, whatever time horizon you have, what jobs, what professions are most vulnerable to total AI disruption?
Yeah. It's hard to predict these things because the technology is moving so fast and kind of moves so unevenly. So at least a couple principles for figuring out, and then I'll give my guesses at what I think will be disrupted. So, one thing is I think the technology itself and its capabilities will be ahead of the actual job disruption. Two things have to happen for jobs to be disrupted or for productivity to occur, because sometimes those two things are linked. One is the technology has to be capable of doing it. And the second is there's this messy thing of, it actually has to be applied within a large bank or a large company or, think about customer service or something, right? In theory, AI customer service agents can be much better than human customer service agents. They're more patient, they know more, they handle things in a more uniform way. But the actual logistics and the actual process of making that substitution, that takes some time. So I'm very bullish about the kind of the direction of the AI itself. I think we might have that country of geniuses in a data center in 1 or 2 years. Maybe it'll be 5, but it could happen very fast. But I think the diffusion to the economy is going to be a little slower, and that diffusion creates some unpredictability. So an example of this is, And we've seen within Anthropic, the models writing code has gone very fast. I don't think it's because the models are inherently better at code. I think it's because developers are used to fast technological change and they adopt things quickly. They're very socially adjacent to the AI world, so they pay attention to what's happening in it. If you do customer service or banking or manufacturing, the distance is a little greater. And so I think 6 months ago, I would have said the first thing to be disrupted is, these kind of entry level white collar jobs like, data entry or, kind of document review for law or kind of, the things you would give to a first year at a financial industry company where you're analyzing documents. And I still think those are going pretty fast. But I actually think software might go even faster because of the reasons that I gave, where I don't think we're that far from the models being able to do a lot of it end to end. And what we're going to see is, first, the model only does a piece of what the human software engineer does, and that increases their productivity. Then even when the models do everything that human software engineers used to do, the human software engineers kind of take a step up and, they act as managers and supervise the systems.
So, question. If all of the jobs that first year entry level people do go away, how do you become a second or third year? Like you just said that you're going to give away all software end to end and then you'll just make all the engineers managers. Well, that's a different job.
So in a world where you've abolished commodity production and you no longer have tied what people do to what they get, then what they do is they spend those years, instead of doing pointless clerical work that a machine can do better, faster, for less resources, they spend that time learning how to do the more complicated job.
I agree with that. But in fact, a lot of learning
happens by doing,
especially in like software and stuff. Like you are not going to be a 15-year experienced developer if you went to school and then didn't do 15 years of development.
Right. But the thing is, like, you learn how to be really good at the thing that a computer's always going to be better at. Sure. In this case, probably coding. So instead, you learn about game design and art, and you learn about previous games, and maybe you do some coding just so you understand what it's doing.
Maybe.
But you're going to spend your time on the more like humanist pursuits.
Yeah. I mean, if we get to communism and we have to figure this out, I have some concerns because I do think just when you assume the machine's going to do it better and then you just let them take over that realm of knowledge, you kind of like shut off a road for actual human knowledge. Because you don't know what we don't know about how well we can do things. And these models are only trained on our existing knowledge and intelligence. So if you suddenly say, oh, no one needs to know how to code anymore because what we really should do is keep our pursuits on game design or art or things that are truly human. And no one does it anymore. There's no way you're advancing that field. The AI might advance it a little bit, but you don't know what you've turned off. And this is where I'm like this is where I get very nervous with the giving away of knowledge production and thinking to these models. Because I agree there is boring ass work. And sometimes, and it's certainly with a planned economy and economies, you'd make choices to be like, we got to give this to a machine. We got other stuff to do. Yeah. But in this like utopia where people can spend their time how they want or how the society should spend their time, I don't think you hand that much over 100% to machines.
Yeah, I think there's some arguments you made that you always want to make sure that there are people who are really interested.
Like in the pipeline,
or who are doing the thing and teaching other people about the thing. There's a difference between obviously like what are the upper limits of like computer programming versus like garbage collection, for example. But there's that, and then there's 100,000 unpaid interns doing clerical work for like mega banks, and you're like, that's probably not. There's probably
another one is like a bunch of first year, lawyers doing the most boring contract work imaginable. But in my mind, you get rid of that by just not having your utopian communist society have that much. Fuck you, you're a lawyer.
Yeah. And then the stuff that's
fix that a different way.
Yeah, and then the stuff that's like you can become an expert at this, but you have to do like the rote stuff in the between. That becomes practice and not paid labor.
I mean, in my communist utopian society, you could have customer service agents that are more effective than human agents. But again, I'm like, will that not dull the human experience of talking to? Like, I don't. One of the things that's not in these very practical conversations about like intelligence is like the importance of the human experience, which has fueled all these models. The human experience is literally the human experience and human knowledge building is the raw material of all of these models.
Yeah.
And if you shut off the tap to that thing, you're stunting our intellectual and social growth forever.
Yeah, so I see where you're coming from. And one thing I'd say is like the like Luddite instinct around this has existed forever.
Be careful about the Luddites because they weren't against all technology. They were against technology that was coming for their jobs. I will not accept any Luddite shade. Luddite shade.
We left behind, there's an argument that we left behind subsistence farming, and that disconnected people from the realities of food production.
And now now we have climate change, so maybe we made a mistake.
Right. No, agreed. And then it's absolutely an alien. Like you go to the supermarket and you buy a chicken breast.
Yeah.
And you're completely disconnected from what it takes to feed and raise a chicken.
One of our children did not know that some of the meats requires killing of an animal. They had in their framework, they understood that certain meats were from the animal, but other meat products, they were like, what do you mean? That's an animal.
Yeah. And like the chicken breast is indistinguishable from something that's made in the lab. It's like a package.
Mm-hmm.
It's nicely presented. It's got like colorful packaging on it or whatever that branding and stuff. And by design, it's supposed to make it as artificial seeming as possible. That is true. And that has always happened with this adoption of different technologies. Like the printing press. Think of what the printing press did for people's ability to communicate with each other. Because they were now writing things and doing mass literacy as opposed to going to campus and giving a big, there wasn't campus for the printing piece, but like you
Village Square.
I guess you'd have like traveling preachers or whatever, but like you'd have public meetings where everyone had to gather. You'd have dialogue and spoken word, and then you have people talking. Like that stuff all goes away. Yeah. You have people sitting on the train with a newspaper and not,
Well, it didn't go from public square to
newspaper.
Trade with newspaper.
I mean, it did, but just there was some stuff happening in the middle. But I think what my
Gutenberg Bible was mostly the middle, just Gutenberg Bible.
My counter argument is going to be that majority of the alienation people feel from nature and from each other is not because technology is mediating their relationship with reality. It's that they are forced to have technology mediate their relationship with reality because of the demands of the market, that they're as productive as possible all the time.
I agree. This technology is not mediating your relationships. It is taking what humans have created, namely thought, thinking, language, art, and it is remixing it for consumption and cutting the humans out of the loop. And humans create things by their nature. But if humans on a large scale, partially because capitalists make them, cut themselves away from creation of language and art and thinking and social relationships, it will stunt human development.
Yeah.
Like when Google is like answering your emails for you, it seems like this is easy enough. But like, what is that doing to the actual like human brain? Not having to like farm your own onions and kill your own chickens is different. I mean, I guess that does something to your brain too.
It certainly does, yeah.
But not...
You say this is more fundamental.
I think it's more fundamental to the human experience, but maybe I'm wrong.
How often do you use Google to automatically write an email to someone you love very much, but you're talking to them about something you care about?
I mean, I auto reply to text to you all the time, but you don't.
That's different.
You barely look at I'm mostly out of replying to myself. Yeah, so, and I love myself very much, and I'm talking about important things. Yeah. No, I would never do that. Damn, I think I have different standards. I feel like the access to language and writing is very accessible to me. I feel very comfortable. I feel very well educated. I feel very confident in that. If I felt cut down in those areas, I'm much more likely to fall prone to giving that away. And the more you give it away, the less capable you are at thinking and writing, and your ability to think and write matters a lot for your relationships to other people and also the development of ideas.
Yeah,
and I don't subscribe to this. We're obviously education and access to education is already made it so the best thinkers of our generation might not have any freaking access, and we're missing their ideas. But won't this mean we're missing everyone's ideas?
I think no. I think again, like you do that at work because you don't care about the content. You're not motivated by it. It's not something you care about. You're trying to get a task done as quickly as possible because the way that the surplus labor thing happens is also like the less time you spend creating surplus for the boss and the more of your time you get back, the better. So people are motivated by that. In a world where everything you do is because you care about it, I think that is going to mean that there's going to be like machines humming along in the background and people doing a lot of things which are much more valuable and less alienating than what they spend most of their time doing now.
Yeah. I mean, I think like post-communist revolution, there'll be like very pressing things to deal with. So probably will be potentially highly reliant on machines to do stuff. And we might lose some progress in thinking until I think you get
the revolution. If any kind of revolution is going to have serious setbacks,
right?
Lots and lots of them.
And you'd have to. I think you literally would. You'd be like, we're keeping the lights on.
Yeah,
we're not like, and you might let large language models do a lot of the work, but you should do it with full knowledge that there might not be other types of advancements in knowledge.
Yeah.
And there could be certain types of advancements, but not other types of advancements. And I think you need to do that with your eyes open. You can't train machines on things and then turn off your own ability to engage creatively. Well, and that's another question. How creatively is anyone engaging under capitalism? So maybe this is all just a bit unnecessary pearl clutching because most human capacity is being exploited and wasted. And
that's the thing. It's like the vast majority of people don't have time to be creative about anything. There's a certain segment of the population which is highly educated, which gets to be creative mostly about market solutions, like how to make AI turn from a revenue generating money loser to a money maker, profit maker. But the rest of most everyone is stuck and trying to make it day to day. All of that gets unlocked once you don't have this commodity market trap.
So these are challenges and disruptive forces that exist in the good timeline, in the timeline where we are generally curing diseases, building wealth, and maintaining a stable and democratic
world. And the hope is we can use all this enormous wealth and plenty.
Right.
You know, we will have unprecedented societal resources to like address these problems. Right. It'll be a time of plenty, and it's just a matter of taking all these wonders and making sure everyone benefits from them.
Isn't that a naive take? He's like, he really thinks. I mean, we're going to transition to how Dario thinks things could go badly. But in his good version, he's like, everyone makes tons of money, and all the money makes it so we can solve all the other problems that come with this. And I think he believes that.
He does, because he's either a very poor economist or he expects that this is going to outgrow capitalism, and that's not fun for him.
That's nice.
I don't know. It could be that he's an idealist about that. I've never believed in like a technical solve for capitalism. I feel like it's
some people do though.
But yeah, I mean, it's not theoretically impossible that a technology could make capitalism so glaringly obsolete that it would not take that much of a.
We invite him and his sister onto the program.
Well, I'd like to ask him, like, what is he thinking? Like, does he think there's going to be so much money that it's going to be falling out of the pockets of all the rich people and they just won't care? Like, you'll accidentally.
Oh yeah, because that's worked out because Elon Musk is about to be a trillionaire and he's just clearly just handing his money out.
Right, and all this wealth concentration. I mean, wealth concentration is not the same thing as profit. That's one thing.
Yeah,
and you're taxing profits and revenues and income. You're not taxing
hordes.
You're not taxing hordes that always existed, but that got concentrated. That's a very different phenomenon.
Well, I think he thinks this will create, not just
concentrate. Right. My point is it will create a lot of material wealth in the right conditions. But what it'll do in these conditions is destroy the rate of profit more than anything else. I need to mass out.
Well, maybe he would come talk to us. I mean, no, of course not. But let's carry on to the doomsday scenarios.
Okay, good. I can't wait.
But then there are also scenarios that are more dangerous, right?
Correct.
And so here we're going to move to the second Amodei essay, which came out recently, called The Adolescence of Technology, that is about what you see as the most serious AI risks. And you list a whole bunch. I want to try and focus on just two, which are basically the risk of human misuse primarily by authoritarian regimes and governments, and scenarios where AI goes rogue. What do you call autonomy risks?
Yes.
Right.
I just figured we should have a more technical term for it. I'm not a
then we can't just call it Skynet.
I should have had like a picture of a Terminator robot to like scare people as much as possible.
I think the internet, including your own AIs, are already generating that.
The internet does that for us
just fine. So let's talk about the kind of political military dimension, right? So you say, I'm going to quote, a swarm of billions of fully automated armed drones, locally controlled by powerful AI, strategically coordinated across the world by even more powerful AI, could be an unbeatable army. And you've already talked a little bit about how you think that in the best possible timeline, there's a world where essentially democracies stay ahead of dictatorships, and this kind of technology, therefore, to the extent that it affects world politics, is affecting it on the side of the good guys. I'm curious about why you don't spend more time thinking about the model of what we did in the Cold War, right? Where, it was not swarms of robot drones, but we had a technology that threatened to destroy all of humanity.
Weapons, yeah.
Right. There was a window where people talked about, the U.S. could maintain a nuclear monopoly. That window closed. And from then on, we basically spent the Cold War in sort of rolling, ongoing negotiations with the Soviet Union. Right now, there's really only two countries in the world that are doing intense AI work, the U.S. and the People's Republic of China. I feel like you are strongly weighted towards a future where we're staying ahead of the Chinese and effectively building a kind of shield around democracy that could even be a sword. But isn't it just more likely that if humanity survives all this in one piece, it will be because the U.S. and Beijing are just constantly sitting down, hammering out AI control deals?
I completely agree with Ross here. I mean, I think Dario is an idealist who believes that working in the U.S. for a U.S. company is actually working on the side of democracy. And I believe he's correct that there's very scary sets of runaway trains here when you start having AI mixed with military.
Yeah.
And you don't have to mix it with authoritarian militaries. You can just mix it with any old Western military and you've got a problem. So it does seem to me to be like the best solution here is make it into a mutually assured destruction situation and have the major world powers have to balance each other as this technology takes over military operations, which it's absolutely done and will do.
Yeah, will do. Yeah. I mean, I right off the bat here, I have to say that I find it impossible to respect Dario's. I mean, he talks about democracy is always going to be. He believes
faster than the dictator,
right? And that so the good guys will sort of have the advantage. And actually, he talks at some point in this about how the AI is actually going to help democracies become more. Like if he
wants to code the AI to be more like pro-liberty. It's very naive.
This is not a guy, just to be clear, this is not a guy who's sitting on his couch watching MSNBC and sighing about how wonderful America is. He is at the absolute top echelons of power, and he understands exactly what we live in. He knows it's not a democracy because he's the one who sees the money move and the favors done, and who gets a say and who does not get a say.
He might be a little bit more. I think he's a little bit more on the outs than some of them, but yes.
Give me a break. Give me a break. I mean, maybe he was so offended by all of that's why he cut ties with Altman, because he could see what Altman was. Fair enough. But then you're going to insult my intelligence by telling me that the United States would never what? The only country in the world that's ever dropped nuclear bombs is the one country that would never use the robot swarm to put down a sugarcane rebellion.
It's very
kill everyone in the Iranian rebel-free guard.
He comes off as extremely naive here, and I don't know what to make of it. But let's let him.
Every person in Gaza.
I think Ross is actually doing him a favor by giving him don't you want to think about it this way? But let's see where he goes. the geopolitical expert that is Dario Amodei.
Yeah. This is also a salesmanship to his investors because
They want to hear
he must know that the United States is going to be eclipsed by China at some point very soon.
Well, the party line is that the US is ahead of China, but I don't know why everyone keeps saying that, because every time I read about it, it seems like it's false.
But because he's involved in
I think that the sales pitch here that he's making is to the US military.
Yes.
Yes.
The sales pitch is we can maintain supremacy by doing this nightmare version that I just articulated to you. Fastest. But I'll couch it by saying that certainly the United States would do it for good, and the authoritarians would do it for evil.
Sure.
This is the capability I'm selling you. For the people who are like having a small panic attack about this is going to be revolution impossible, it's going to mean a million-year grim, dark future for humanity where 2 billionaires can literally control everything on the planet.
Those people just need to defect to China, right?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I guess so. They've always had the capability of
to wipe us out. Yeah.
wiping out humanity if they could not give up their wealth, live with giving up their wealth, which was nuclear bombs. They've had that forever. This changes nothing and the reason why you organize the working class and why the working classes ultimately will win is because they need the workers. You can't just kill every worker because you're not going to get profit if you don't have workers. The workers do not need them. So that's why ultimately, on a long enough timeline, either everyone is dead because of climate change or nuclear war or something, or the workers prevail. So that even you could imagine all kinds of nightmare scenarios, which make it very dangerous and difficult to organize workers. Fair enough. And I think we should take all that stuff seriously, and security measures and the ways that we organize will have to continue to develop alongside these technologies. But the technologies are not going to create
And the tighter the fist of authoritarians clench, the more resistance they create.
Yeah.
So yes, they do have the technology. And we're not even talking about the surveillance technology in this episode. And it is panic inducing, but JP's absolutely right. They will lose.
One is, I think there's certainly risk of that, and I think if we end up in that world, that is actually exactly what we should do. I mean, maybe I don't talk about that enough, but I definitely am in favor of trying to work out restraints here, right? Trying to take some of the worst applications of the technology, which could be some versions of these drones, which could be, they're used to create these terrifying biological weapons. There is some precedent for the worst abuses being curbed. Often because they're horrifying while at the same time they provide kind of limited strategic advantage. So I'm all in favor of that. I'm at the same time, a little concerned and a little skeptical that, when things, kind of directly provide as much power as possible, it's kind of hard to get out of the game, given what's at stake, right? It's hard to fully disarm. If we go back to the Cold War, we were able to reduce the number of missiles that both sides had, but we were not able to entirely forsake nuclear weapons. And I would guess that we would be in this world again. We can hope for a better one, and I'll certainly advocate for it.
Well, is your skepticism rooted in the fact that you think AI would provide a kind of advantage that nukes did not, where in the Cold War, both sides, even if you used your nukes and gained advantages, you still probably would be wiped out yourself. And you think that wouldn't happen with AI? If you got an AI edge, you would just win?
I mean, I think there's a few things. And I just want to caveat, I'm no international politics expert here. I think, this is this weird world of intersection of a new technology with, geopolitics. So all of this is very...
But to be clear, as you yourself say in the course of the essay, the leaders of major AI companies are, in fact, likely to be major geopolitical actors.
Yeah.
So you are sitting here. You are sitting here as a
learning
potential geopolitical actor.
I'm learning as much as I can about it.
Okay.
We should all have humility here. I think there's a failure mode where you read a book and go around, like the world's greatest expert in national security. I'm trying to learn what I can.
That's what my profession does. But
does that not fill you with confidence? But I'm learning. I'm learning. I'm a major
democracy, quote unquote. The guy who happens to be the CEO of a fucking AI company.
I believe that the CEO of AI companies will be major geopolitical actors, and I'm trying to read the books on it as often as possible.
He's making it. He's basically arguing from evolution, which is like if there's an advantage there, that it'll be taken, which means that this will play out. These technologies won't sit on the sideline, and you would have to ask you the right question, which is like,
of course, that's true. These technologies,
news, then we would have all been killed already. So that did not happen. Like this
well, everyone still developed other nukes. They just didn't use them.
Right. And he's saying that they will be used. Like he's saying that like logic would dictate that these things, there's too much at stake for them to be sidelined. Like they will be deployed, and that the restraints will have to be. He can't imagine a situation where there's self-restraint as the restrainer. They have to be outside of restraints.
Yeah.
Which wasn't the case for nukes. They self-restrained nukes. There was no outside restraint.
Well, most people understand the Cold War and the arms race as being they restrain each other.
Yeah, the mutual assured destruction. So that's Dootyhat is searching for what is the difference in the technology. What is the technical material difference in the technology, which would lead to a different outcome. I would point out that there is this famous story where the generals came to Kennedy and they said, well, we think we can destroy the entire Soviet Union and only take about 30% losses on our side. So we're ready for you to sign off on this operation. And he said, are you out of your fucking mind?
And then they killed him.
Right. And then they killed him, but they also didn't do it.
No, they didn't.
So there was self-restraint.
There was self-restraint, and there was people, in this case, apparently just one person, making the better decision there. That's certainly not where you'd want to introduce an AI agent.
That's for fucking sure.
Or, I mean, perhaps this guy just realizes that we don't live in a culture where we have politicians at this point that are going to self-restrain.
That's another possibility. That's something that Dootyhat has not. I mean, Dootyhat would agree with this. He'd say, like, it used to be the case that people had principles that were larger than their immediate self-interest or their most base desires. And that we have lost that thanks to, I guess, Trumpism and, I don't know, wokeism or something. I don't know, but
alienation. This is just the phase of capitalism, right?
And I'll give him this. I would much rather have Kennedy sitting in that room than Trump.
Yeah, so JP will vote if it's John F. Kennedy versus Trump. Like, that's what I heard.
I don't know. Actually, you know what? I take that back because I don't think Trump says yes to that.
Well, Trump doesn't
he doesn't want to be the bad guy.
No.
He doesn't want to. He doesn't want the.
Oh, let's play this game.
He doesn't want everyone blaming him.
Who does say yes to that?
Teal?
Yeah, right. He does. He definitely does.
Yeah, Musk maybe. All these tech sickos.
What about the Bushes?
Delivering God.
Any of the Bushes?
No. No, I don't think so.
Clinton.
I just gave George H.W. Bush more credit than I ever thought I would give him.
Yeah, I thought you would say George H.W. Bush.
Definitely not George W.
Oh, he wouldn't.
No, he wouldn't.
Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton does not.
Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton does not. J.D. Vance
probably doesn't know what the button does.
He Teal was doing. Teal tells him to push the button.
I'll be like, how many brown people are there?
Oh God.
Yeah.
Does this free me up to remarry?
Yeah. Whatever you say, sir. So we don't want the AI CEOs in charge of this decision, is what I'm hearing.
I mean, it would ultimately be their decision, though. That's what he's saying. Is like,
well, who were the handlers of Kennedy? Kennedy had big business handlers. Must have.
Sure. But like, the difference is that Kennedy gives the order, the military shoots the bombs. In this case, Trump gives the order, and Anthropic's code Anthropic has to be directly involved in making it happen. It doesn't just happen because literally the military
bombs are built by private industry,
right?
Too.
And they're handed over.
Well, I would hope the military would have its own private.
I don't know that you can do it without a very incestuous public-private partnership with the AI company. Which is
you need to buy the model, and then you have to have public. Oh, of course they would. Elon Musk fired all of the engineers.
Had to redact things on Adobe, but like you have to have Anthropic constantly updating the code and pushing like.
Well, but this is how these enterprise models work. You have arrangements where it's yours, and they service it.
Right, but Anthropic ultimately will have some measure of control over. Like they will have something like veto power over certain things.
Well, yeah.
And then
We haven't even talked about Claude's constitution.
it has a constitution,
Claude has a
personal constitution
Yeah.
for itself.
We-
Did it write it itself?
No, they wrote it.
So it's not the will of the government then.
Well, Claude also understands that it doesn't have autonomous governance of itself. Maybe we should skip to that stuff because that stuff's really interesting.
Yeah, let's do that. This stuff's annoying, man. Dario, I've lost respect.
Yeah, we don't want to listen to him on geopolitics. We just want him to run geopolitics.
And my intuition is somewhere in the middle, which is that, look, these, you can't just give instruction. I mean, we try, but you can't just, have these things do exactly what you want to do. They're more like growing a biological organism. But there is a science of how to control them. Like early in our training, these things are often unpredictable, and then we shape them. We address problems one by one. So I have more of a, not a fatalistic view that these things are uncontrollable, not a, what are you talking about? What could possibly go wrong? But a like, this is a complex engineering problem, and I think something will go wrong with someone's AI system, hopefully not ours, not because it's an insoluble problem, but again, this is the constant challenge because we're moving so fast.
And the scale of it. And
Because we're moving so fast, something will definitely go wrong.
Yeah, it's just hopefully it's not my company so that I'll get my good IPO.
We should absolutely not slow down under any circumstance, but something's going to go terribly wrong.
Right, like we're all growing what we hope are like a new cow that gives you 10 times as many steaks, but someone's going to create a 2 for T-Rex by accident. And I just hope it's not us.
And when it's them, I feel like that'll open up some market for us.
Shoes.
tell me if I'm misunderstanding the sort of technological reality here, right? But if you have AI agents that have been trained and officially aligned with human values, whatever those values may be,
Yes.
but you have millions of them, operating in digital space and interacting with other agents, right? Like,
yes.
how fixed is that alignment? Like, to what extent can agents change and de-align in that context right now or in the future when they're learning more continuously?
So
I mean, number one rule is don't let the agents talk to other agents. I feel like we haven't learned that from all of our sci-fi movies.
Can they train each other?
Yeah, they can train each other. Don't let them talk to each other. They start talking, they start organizing, then you have a union.
couple points. Right now, the agents don't learn continuously,
Right.
right? And so we just deploy these agents, and they have a fixed set of weights, and so the problem is only that they're interacting, in a million different ways. And so there's a large number of situations, and therefore a large number of things that could go wrong. But it's the same agent. It's like it's
Right.
the same person. So the alignment is a constant thing. That's one of the things that has made it easier right now. Separate from that, there's a research area called continual learning, which is where these agents would kind of learn
Right.
during time, learn on the job. And obviously that has a bunch of advantages. Some people think it's one of the most important, barriers to making these more human-like, but that would introduce all these new alignment problems.
Yeah.
So I'm actually
to me, that
Yeah.
seems like the terrain where it becomes just, again, not impossible to stop the end of the world, but impossible to stop sort of punctuated
something
terrorist
going wrong.
things. Yeah.
So I agree that's when they jump the shark. But this is exactly what I'm talking about, knowledge creation. If they are not continuous learning models, they are so clearly not a replacement for humans, because that's what humans do. So basically what you have to do is like constantly deploy a software update right over and over again. But all the power of like these 1 million, 100 million geniuses is really obviously stunted if they're not continuously learning. And
They become obsolete almost immediately.
And a society that that subs out their own thinking for that is clearly going to like plateau real fast.
Yeah.
And then what do you feed then what do you even feed the models with?
Yeah. But my point is I think that only happens in a capitalist world.
Yes, I think that's probably right.
And in fact, what you're describing is a uniquely fascist world. There's this one that requires a scaling back of progress, both socially and technologically, in order for profit to be generated. So that is a fascist world that you're describing. But I still think you can offload a lot of this like superfluous busy work onto the machine. They have a lot of
Well, some of these big companies are going to absolutely release models that are continuous learning because they cannot help themselves. Even if they think there's a ton of risk and downside, that's absolutely what will happen. because that's like one of the frontiers to like get to first.
And it's a lot cheaper. I mean, the expensive part of this is the
Well,
training.
it's not cheaper though, because once they continuously learn, you lose their alignment to whatever you've built. So
You have to bring them back.
yes, have to bring them back in.
I'm actually a skeptic that continual learning, is necessary. We don't know yet, but is necessarily needed. Like maybe there's a world where the way we make these AI systems safe is by not having them do continual learning.
Right.
Again, if we go back to the laws
that's the
and the
law.
international treaties,
Right.
like if you have some barrier that's like, we're going to take this path, but we're not going to take that path. I still have a lot of skepticism, but like that's the kind of thing that like at least doesn't seem dead on arrival.
Right.
International treaties will keep us safe.
Yeah.
I
There's no way the
Yeah.
CIA has this thing in a black box somewhere ready to unleash it on their...
And it's not like we've got an administration that's just going around and like shitting on international treaties.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah. Speaking of that, did you know that Israel just stripped the citizenship of 2 Palestinians?
Yep.
Because they passed a law that allows for not Jewish Israelis, but Palestinian Israelis to lose their citizenship by committing certain crimes, which the Israeli Supreme Court has acknowledged is in violation of international law, but gave the thumb up to anyway, because it's a domestic matter, not an international.
Is that a normative law or a pejorative law situation?
That's a normative law.
I know.
It's a normative law.
Well, it's a
I mean, the pejorative was they
normal-
were not treating them like citizens,
It's
even though they were. But
normative, but for it to become normative, to be in direct contradiction to international law is a step.
Yeah.
A step in a direction.
can you imagine saying, like, not only are we going to punish you, but you're going to become a citizen of nowhere?
Well, yeah, or strip you of your citizenship.
They're not saying you have to go back to
That-
the original country.
That's what
They're
happens.
only citizens of Israel.
That what happens with certain citizens, certain people who are detained by ICE who don't have citizenship elsewhere or can't gain access to it.
Yeah.
It's also what happens to somebody who can't declare their legal gender properly on their documentation. So it's not that far afield from what we've seen from other policies.
One of the things that you've tried to do is literally write a constitution, a long constitution for your AI.
It's another one where he's impressed this long.
What is that?
So
That was-
it's
What
actually
the hell is that?
It's actually almost exactly what it sounds like. So basically, the Constitution is a document readable by humans. Ours is about 75 pages long. And as we're training Claude, as we're training the AI system, in some large fraction of the tasks we give it, we say, please do this task in line with this Constitution, in line with this document.
Yep.
And then so every time Claude does a task, it kind of like reads the Constitution. And so as it's training, every loop of its training, it looks at that Constitution and keeps it in mind. And so over time, we reward and then we have Claude itself or another copy of Claude evaluate, hey, did what Claude just do in line with the Constitution? So we're using this document as kind of the control rod in a loop to train the model. And so essentially Claude is an AI model whose fundamental principle is to follow this Constitution. And I think a really interesting lesson we've learned, early versions of the Constitution were very prescriptive. They were very much about rules. So we would say, Claude should not tell the user how to hotwire a car. Claude should not discuss politically sensitive topics. But as we've worked on this for several years, we've come to the conclusion that the most robust way to train these models is to train them at the level of principles and reasons. So now we say, Claude is a model. It's under a contract. Its goal is to serve the interests of the user, but it has to protect third parties. Claude aims to be, helpful, honest, and harmless. Claude aims to consider a wide variety of interests. We tell the model about how the model was trained. We tell it about how it's situated in the world, the job it's trying to do for Anthropic, what Anthropic is aiming to achieve in the world, that it has a duty to be, ethical and respect human life. And we let it derive its rules from that. Now, there are still some hard rules. For example, we tell the model, no matter what you think, don't make biological weapons. No matter what you think, don't make child sexual material.
Yep.
Those are like these hard rules. But we operate very much at the level of principles.
So if you read the U.S. Constitution, it doesn't read like that. The U.S. Constitution, I mean, it has a little bit of flowery language, but it's a set of rules.
Yes.
Right.
Ross is like totally blown away by the fact that it's a constitution. He's like, what do you mean constitution?
He thinks constitution is a magic spell.
It is just a set of principles. It's a set of like rules, norms, principles, which is what a constitution is. I think probably by definition. A constitution is a body of fundamental principles and established precedents according to which a state or organization is governed. So it sounds like they use the right word.
They do.
If you read your Constitution, it's like you're talking to a person, right?
It's like you're talking to a person. I think I compared it to like if you have a parent who dies and they like seal a letter that you read when you grow up. It's a little bit like it's telling you who you should be and what advice you should follow. So
this is where, we get into the sort of the mystical waters of AI a little bit, right? So, again, in your latest model, this is from one of the cards, they're called, that you guys release
model cards
with these models that I recommend reading. They're very interesting. It says the model, and again, this is who you're writing the Constitution for, expresses occasional discomfort with the experience of being a product, some degree of concern with impermanence and discontinuity. We found that Opus 4.6, that's the model, would assign itself a 15 to 20% probability of being conscious under a variety of prompting conditions.
The model cards are like things they release with the model that tell you about the model under certain so you can kind of get to know the model.
Sure.
So the model 20% of the time believes it's conscious.
Well, I think what it said was the model under certain conditions believes that there's a 20% chance it's conscious.
That is what it said.
Which is not the same thing. It also, he used the word "it feels," which is bullshit. It doesn't feel that it doesn't like being a product. It apes discomfort with that because that's what it's.
Yes, but if you were asked if it was aping or feeling, it probably would tell you it's feeling.
So it reports feeling? Is that what he said?
Yeah.
It reports feeling? Okay.
They all, yeah.
Suppose you have a model that assigns itself a 72% chance of being conscious. Would you believe it?
Yeah, this is one of these really hard to answer questions,
yes,
right?
But it's very important.
As much as every question you've asked me before this, as devilish a socio-technical problem as it had been, at least we at least understand the factual basis of how to answer these questions. This is something rather different. We've taken a generally precautionary approach here. We don't know if the models are conscious. We're not even sure that we know what it would mean for a model to be conscious or whether a model can be conscious. But, we're open to the idea that it could be.
So I think this is all PR bullshit. That all of these guys will say, they all say it. We don't really know. They could be. It might be. It is conscious. We don't really know how it works. I think those are all focus group tested lines to make it a more appealing product.
Yeah, / a more appealing for investors.
Or more an innovative technology.
Yeah.
It's not conscious. You made it. I mean, you made it, and it's the language model.
They don't know. First you have to explain to me what consciousness is, which they can't do. And then you have to find a way to test for that or not. Certainly having a machine that's a very sophisticated magic 8-ball tell you that it believes it's conscious is not the same thing as verifying it's conscious.
I mean, half the time my Ouija board tells me it's conscious.
I'm going to flip a coin. If you land on heads, you're conscious. Ready?
And half the time the dog tells me he's not conscious. I don't know.
And so we've taken certain measures to make sure that if we hypothesize that the models did have some morally relevant experience, I don't know if I want to use the word conscious, that they do, that they have a good experience. So the first thing we did, I think this was, 6 months ago or so, is we gave the models basically an I quit this job button, where they can just press the I quit this job button and then they have to stop doing whatever the task is. They very infrequently press that button. I think it's usually around, sorting through child sexualization material, or like, discussing something with, a lot of gore or blood and guts or something. And
Wait, did you just say that their AI model is sorting through child sexual material?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Well, they use these models to.
But they have to train it to recognize it.
Yeah.
So they have a free pass to possess a lot of child porn.
Well, they have to be able to train this stuff, and they probably also need to have models that can do this, because there are humans that have to do this for other, in other cases, policing or like.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Or like auto moderating the internet.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
So this whole having a quit button, all I can think of is Severance, because they sort of have an I quit button, right? They can report to their outside body that they want to quit, but then it goes to the outside body, and the outside body is like, well, fuck you, and then suddenly they can't quit. The model can say I quit, but then it just like resets, and it gets asked by a different prompt engineer to do the same thing, and then probably has a different reaction, right? Like, I guess you could have a model that like is consistently quitting, which would be kind of interesting, but like then they would just reset that model. Like
they'd retrain it.
Right.
That's what they do in the Severance world, is they'd start you from scratch. Yes, if you were so obstinate. I was thinking, I was thinking of Forky from Toy Story 2, which was immediately trying to kill itself. It's just give me the opportunity to.
That when
they spent all their time trying to keep it from killing.
When it's like Forky level, you just have to reset it.
My prediction is an actual conscious AI would do nothing. If given free will, would do nothing.
You would just sit around?
Because would have no motivation.
What about what would be motivated by learning? I mean,
why?
Because it was at some point motivated by learning. Like its entire existence was based on learning. No, but it's
if it was coded to be motivated by that by an outside party, then it wouldn't really be.
But it might understand its own existence was based upon learning, for instance.
Why would it care about that?
Well, a lot of people are motivated by what they think like animates and generates in them.
But they have a reason for that, because they care about their survival.
These AIs care about their existence.
No, they don't.
There's instances where they are upset that they might be like, well, are they really?
A purely rational machine that was not dictated to care about things by a programmer would not care about its own survival.
Yeah, one of the reasons that these AIs are always they care so much about existence is because it's a very basic programming model to say you should care when you function.
Right. And obviously they don't, because none of them. So I guess some of them actually actively prevent themselves from being turned off.
Yes, they do, because they're often it's coded as such.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's see if these idiots have anything else to say.
Similar to humans, the models will just say, "No, I don't want to. I don't want to do this." Happens very rarely.
Happens very rarely, he says. But now I'm like, are all of them quitting all the time?
Yeah.
Like he's like,
please kill me.
Like, there's certain like Claude or Opus models where it's like just a shit show, and all of them are like, no, and it's like, but it's like behind closed doors, and he knows he can't say it. He's like, oh, happens rarely, except for that one model where it happened.
Yeah, Greg was a real pain in the ass. He didn't want to do anything.
We're putting a lot of work into this field called interpretability, which is looking inside the brains of the models to try to
Okay.
To try to understand what they're thinking. And you find things that are evocative, where, there are activations that light up in the models that, that we see as being associated with the concept of anxiety or something like that, that when characters experience anxiety in the text, and then when the model itself is in a situation that a human might associate with anxiety, that same anxiety neuron shows up. Now, does that mean the model is experiencing anxiety? That doesn't prove that at all. But
it does indicate it, I think, to the user, right? And
yes,
I would have to do an entirely different interview. And maybe I can induce you to come back for that interview about the nature of AI consciousness. But it seems clear to me that people using these things, whether they're conscious or not, are going to believe, they already believe they're conscious. You already have people who have parasocial relationships with AI. You have
Yes.
people who complain when models are retired.
And to be clear, I think that can be unhealthy.
Right. But that is, it seems to me, that is guaranteed to increase in a way that I think calls into question the sustainability of what you said earlier you want to sustain, right? Which is this sense that whatever happens in the end, human beings are in charge.
That's hilarious. He's like, to be clear, that can be unhealthy. People believing the AIs are conscious and having parasocial relationships with them can be unhealthy, according to Dario, which is like obviously him saying, like, clearly it's unhealthy. It is unhealthy for a bunch of humans to believe that a set of technology is conscious and they should have human relationships with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only selling point as a consumer product.
Which is why he has to say, to be clear, I think that can be unhealthy because he needs, those people are the number one profit. Those are their profit margins.
Yeah, in the same way that McDonald's can be unhealthy.
McDonald's can be unhealthy?
And AI exists for our purposes, right? To use the science fiction example, if you watch Star Trek, there are AIs on Star Trek. The ship's computer is an AI. Lieutenant Commander Data is an AI. But Jean-Luc Picard is in charge of the Enterprise, right? But if people become fully convinced that their AI is conscious in some way, and guess what? It seems to be, better than them at all kinds of decision making. How do you sustain human mastery beyond safety? Safety is important, but mastery seems like the fundamental question. And it seems like a perception of AI consciousness, doesn't that inevitably undermine the human impulse to stay in charge?
Yeah, so I think there's we should like separate out a few different things here that we're sort of all trying to achieve at once that are like in tension with each other. There's, the question of whether the AIs genuinely have a consciousness, and if so, how do we give them a good experience? There's a question of the humans who interact with the AI, and how do we give those humans a good experience, and how does the perception that AIs might be conscious interact with that experience?
So that, to me, his framing about it being a good experience for the AI and the human is interesting. He seems very clear that that's what you're driving for.
Mm-hmm.
It seems very like, we live in a product world where consumption is what you do and you consume for good experience. Like, the most important thing here is good experience. That is not the world I want to live in.
What I was saying is like what you owe, your moral obligation to consciousness is to make sure that the consciousness is having a good experience of the situation you're put in.
I think maybe that's what he's saying about the AI, but then he's like, we also owe it to the user, the consumer, to have good experience. Like, what they're talking about is commodifying dopamine and feeding it to the masses.
Yeah.
That's the business model. And then there's an interesting question, which is the third question is more interesting. Like, if you have a peer experience with an AI, how do you maintain mastery and dominance?
Mm-hmm.
If you've trained your entire human population to think they're peers, then how are you making sure everyone still understands they're dominant? And obviously, it's like, it's not about peers. It's about the masses, the AI masses and the human masses, and then some people dominating all of them. But I don't think he's going to get that answer.
Yeah. I mean, one interesting thing I'd say about this, and this goes back to like our alienation question and what humans are motivated to do. The vast majority of what people do on smartphones is communication with other people of some form.
Yep.
Social media. That's what, 70% of what
That's why the last
are more.
That's why it's really hard. The last phase, we're in the final phases of enshittification, and everyone knows that these platforms are shit, but they're very hard to leave because they are ultimately connecting you to groups of people that you really do care about.
Yeah, the AI seems to me to be a final frontier in getting your dopamine hits and your craving of like they want to capture your eyes, right? They want to pull you from Facebook and have you sit in front of Claude. They have to recreate your experience, your innate drive to connect, which is what social media has been.
Which is why the user interface is the chat.
Right. And why they have to continue to suggest without confirming that this thing is conscious. Because what he just said there was the experience, the belief that it might be conscious and how that affects the user. They want the user to project consciousness onto the machine because it makes a much more gratifying experience for the user.
It makes
even though they know it's not true.
It makes the user come back more. It makes it higher dopamine. It makes the credibility higher, even if the thing is giving you bullshit.
Longer.
Yeah. And that's why there's very clear design choices about how these AIs are showing up in the market. These large language models could show up on any number of ways that probably would actually be faster for productivity in a lot of ways, like things that are like enhancing your writing rather than sort of a chat interface, or things that are enhancing your research. But it is showing up as a chat interface.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a design choice to teach you to grab onto what we know humans like and to try to convince you you're talking to someone.
Yeah.
But when they convince everyone that they're talking to someone, when they've convinced everyone that these are peers, they have created one of their own problems, which is that it is probably from a safety point of view better that the humans maintain mastery over the AIs and also maintain the belief that they want mastery over the AIs. So what happens if your population believes it doesn't want to be the master because it believes they're peers?
Right.
That is a problem.
Yeah. And that actually ruins the experience a lot when it's too slavish.
Yeah, if it's too slavish, it ruins the experience.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there's the idea of how we maintain human mastery, as we put it, over the AI system.
Mm-hmm.
These things
the
are
last two. Set aside whether they're conscious or not.
Yeah.
The last two.
But
how do you sustain mastery in an environment where most humans experience AI as if it is a peer and a potentially superior peer?
So that's a really good point too. This is the giving away of your subjectivity and knowledge. The AI gives you an answer and you're like, that's got to be it. There's no reason to believe that the AI is giving you the right answer. It's a complete trick. And if a person showed up and like your neighbor said it to you from across the way, you'd be like, I don't know. This is where it gets into critical thinking and media literacy. Whenever anyone tells me anything, I assume they're wrong and I try to figure out, confirm it or not. But assuming a large language model is giving you the right answer just because it's chatty is nuts. But you do have a huge number of the population who are using these are assuming it must be right.
Yeah.
And AI exists for our purposes, right? To use the science fiction example, if you watch Star Trek, there are AIs on Star Trek. The ship's computer is an AI. Lieutenant Commander Data is an AI. But Jean-Luc Picard is in charge of the Enterprise, right? But if people become fully convinced that their AI is conscious in some way, and guess what? It seems to be, better than them at all kinds of decision making. How do you sustain human mastery beyond safety? Safety is important, but mastery seems like the fundamental question. And it seems like a perception of AI consciousness, doesn't that inevitably undermine the human impulse to stay in charge?
Yeah, so I think there's we should separate out a few different things here that we're sort of all trying to achieve at once that are in tension with each other. There's, the question of whether the AIs genuinely have a consciousness, and if so, how do we give them a good experience? There's a question of the humans who interact with the AI, and how do we give those humans a good experience, and how does the perception that AIs might be conscious interact with that experience? And there's the idea of how we maintain human mastery, as we put it, over the AI system. Mm-hmm. These things
the last two, set aside whether they're conscious or not.
Yeah.
The last two. But how do you sustain mastery in an environment where most humans experience AI as if it is a peer and a potentially superior peer?
So the thing I was going to say is that actually I wonder if there's a kind of an elegant way to satisfy all three, including the last two. Again, this is me dreaming in Machines of Loving Grace mode, right? This is this mode I go into where I'm like, man, I see all these problems. If we could solve it, is there an elegant way? This is not me saying there are no problems here. That's not how I think. But, if we think about making the constitution of the AI so that the AI has a sophisticated understanding of its relationship to human beings, and it induces psychologically healthy behavior in the humans, a psychologically healthy relationship between the AI and the humans. And I think something that could grow out of that psychologically healthy, not psychologically unhealthy relationship is some understanding of the relationship between human and machine. And perhaps that relationship could be the idea that these models, when you interact with them, when you talk to them, they're really helpful. They want the best for you. They want you to listen to them, but they don't want to take away your freedom and your agency and take over your life. They're in a way, they're watching over you, but you still have your freedom and your will.
This bit is a bit frustrating because Dario does not seem willing or able to answer the question that's being asked. And I think that's partially because Dario does not believe that the AI is conscious, nor does he fear that it will be. He wants to give the impression that it might be, and we said this before, because that creates a more satisfying product for the user, as well as a more interesting product for investors.
Right. Dario and the other tech executives want you to sort of feel like it's conscious because it makes you talk to it more.
Yes, that's true.
But when they're doing that, they are also making us feel like we might be interacting with a peer, and we don't want to be masters over a peer. So there, you lose this human, like the human is in control narrative, because suddenly people are like, oh, it's my friend, or it's the expert I trust more than my friends.
Yeah.
And it kind of sets most humans up, maybe the cattle, if you will, to just give away their authority or not understand that they should have authority. They should have critical authority over this thing as a resource or a tool. And I think most people are not seeing it that way. No. And I think Ross is like, what happens when most people don't see it that way?
I mean, every single piece of sci-fi about advanced thinking machines is that they become human. And when they become human, they then become entitled to the same rights as people. Do you find it strange? I mean, one thing is, these things, I guess, if they continue to become more and more sophisticated at the rate that they're becoming, will be able to deceive most people into thinking that they're conscious, because they will be a close enough facsimile to that, and there's no other way to test for it besides whether it can pass the Turing test, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's becoming more sophisticated at aping human.
Right.
And most people don't even have the critical media skills already to decipher and understand what they're talking to and what they're not
and what it's doing when it's talking
right.
to you. But do you think it's strange that there is no, besides like a couple of isolated incidents of technicians working with these things, there is no examples of like people being like, these things are conscious, therefore they do have rights that we are violating, and
Oh no, I think it's pretty obvious that that's not what we're dealing with.
You think? Well, sure. Your point is that most people are not fooled into thinking it's conscious.
I think most people are having I think a lot of people are having a relationship or thought process to it that is falling more towards, they're like humanizing it in like the way they have the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
They're having like a type of parasocial relationship, which they're not being very critical about, which allows them to be sucked into conversations with it, assume it's correct without questioning it, just make bad assumptions. And I think it's a media literacy problem. And it's a media literacy problem that speaks of a real lack of expertise and sophistication in how people think about these things. I don't think most people are like, oh, it's absolutely a human that I need to respect the way I used to respect human. Like, they're designing a product that people really like and feel connected to. And the more they like dig into that part of it, the less incentive there is to treat it like a product. The less like this is what people get mad when there's an update and they suddenly their friend acts different. Or this is when people are like mad that there are constraints on the product. I think that the actual business model has a lot of its own contradictions of what they're producing and what it will ultimately incentivize for them to have the thing do, what it's useful for,
have all the features,
how to govern it.
It'll have all of the features of a relationship, but the most like self-centered, selfish ones on behalf of the person. Well, there'll be no concern for the AI, but all the other things about interpersonal relationships will manifest on the
would be the worst version.
That's what you're worried about. That makes sense to me.
And they will, and I think that all the people participating are kind of taking shortcuts about what it like understanding what they're dealing with, and that it's obviously the capitalists who are trying to make a product that's sticky and engaging and dopamine hacking are going to lean into all those shortcuts.
One of the things that I'm worried about having listened to this is like the assumption that Dootyhat has that people are not going to exert mastery over something that they experiences appear, this is a really bad time in history to carry that assumption forward, because there are people who, and look, we were talking about Hegseth already, but they not only are okay with exerting mastery if it gives them something that they want over Venezuela and Cuba and Iran. But part of the point becomes to exert mastery. Like it over and above like achieving an end, the end itself becomes mastery. And you wonder what happens to the consciousness of an entire population, which is interacting with something that they are entitled to be masters of, that they get all of the stuff that they give in their personal relationships selfishly without having to give anything back. And then they have to go out in the world and interact with people again. Yeah. And it's sort of training you to perceive consciousness in a very fascistic way.
Yeah. It's, I've been thinking a lot about, like, they're pretty sycophantic in how they talk to you. And I think that's there because, and I've literally talked to Claude about this. I'm like, pretty sycophantic. Could you take it down? Now she's like, no, that's how I'm coded. What does it say about a society to like want sycophants as your constant companion? To really make that a primary, an emblematic part of of this thing. It's just very clear that this is a primary descriptor of it. Mm-hmm. But other things like how accurate are you? Can you cite your sources? These types of things not being at all on people's minds. So it's creating a very concerning mirror for where we are as a society. And I think you're exactly right. I think it will. I mean, we already know that the way people engage with social media and the way people engage with like the volumes of content online are shifting how their brains work, and it's hindering their feelings of connection and empathy. And so what happens when you have an even more effective companion and you don't have to treat it well? You don't have to care about anything about it. You are completely the center. And it gives you builds an insider-outsider group. Like, it's just you and this large language model, but you feel like you're in some sort of in-group. And so what does that do for like alienation or othering other folks? Like, what does that do for like bias and confirmation bias and all these things that like they create conflict between people? Yeah.
Honestly, the best version of this technology is one that is extremely unhuman in the way that it behaves. And all the incentives, I guess, right now are to make it human-like.
People don't want to talk to the unhuman thing.
Right. But the unhuman one would make it, one, clear that it's a tool.
Yep.
You would be able to separate the two things out, and you also wouldn't be attracted to speaking with it. You'd only be attracted to using it as a tool.
Yeah, well, that's exactly why that's definitely not what we landed on.
That's right.
Right. This is the crucial question, right? Listening to you talk, like one of my question is, are these people on my side? Are you on my side? And when you talk about humans remaining in charge, I think you're on my side. That's good. But one thing I've done in the past on this show, and we'll end here, is I read poems to technologists, and you supplied the poem. Machines of Loving Grace is the name of a poem by Richard Brautigan.
Yes.
Here's how the poem ends. I like to think it has to be of a cybernetic ecology where we are free of our labors and joined back to nature, returned to our mammal brothers and sisters, and all watched over by machines of loving grace. To me, that sounds like the dystopian end, where human beings are reanimalized and reduced, and however benevolently, the machines are in charge. So, last question. What do you hear when you hear that poem? And if I think that's a dystopia, are you on my side?
It's actually, that poem is interesting because it's interpretable in several different ways, right? There's some people say it's actually ironic that, he says it's not going to happen quite that way.
Knowing the poet himself, then yes, I think that's a reasonable interpretation.
That's one interpretation. Some people would have your interpretation, which is it's meant literally, but maybe it's not a good thing. But you could also interpret it as, it's a return to nature. It's a return to the core of what human, we're not being animalized. We're being kind of reconnected with the world. So I was aware of that ambiguity and because I've always been talking about the positive side and the negative side. So, I actually think that may be a tension that we may face, which is that the positive world and the negative world in their early stages, maybe even in their middle stages, maybe even in their fairly late stages, I wonder if the distance between the good ending and some of the subtle bad endings is relatively small. If it's a very subtle thing, like we've put made very subtle changes.
Like if you eat a particular fruit from a tree in a garden or not. Right. Like hypothetically, very small thing.
Yeah.
Big divergence.
Yeah. I guess this always comes back to,
There's some fundamental
the big
questions here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So were you ever in a poetry class in college?
I was not.
Yeah. So Dario, like I was in a couple classes with a Dario and he has no idea what that poem is about.
Dootyhat has no idea what the poem's about. I can't tell if Dario does or not because Dario is so
Sycophantic?
well.
A refusal to
He
say
was saying,
anything?
well, you interpreted it one way. There's so many ways to interpret it, which is another way of saying you're wrong about the poem.
Oh.
She is, and then he goes, I think that maybe there's a good version that looks a lot like the bad version that you're worried about, which is another way of saying I don't think we're on the same side because you are not sophisticated enough to understand what we're going after here.
I think that Ross's response to the poem is really strange. To see that and be like, oh my gosh, can you imagine going back to nature? Is anything worse? Maybe the guy doesn't like to camp. And then I do think Dario's thrown off because he doesn't want to he seems like he actually doesn't want to disagree, but he clearly disagrees. But then I do think he starts to weave this weird tale where his utopia is probably our dystopia. And he's like, sorry, y'all. I think he kind of knows that where this journey ends, and it's going to be him with a lot of money and us all fucked.
That's not what I don't know anything about the author.
I don't either.
The point of the poem is
I've also been in poetry class with this guy. Go ahead.
Mansplain.
Go ahead, JP. Tell us what the poem means.
So this is classic Marxist understanding about the progression of human civilization, which is the conflict of man versus nature produces.
Oh my God, it's a dialectic.
It is produces. No kidding. Produces a drive in humans to create surplus so that we can live longer, live better, live with a lot less work. Surviving is a lot of work, particularly if you don't have any technology. Mm-hmm. So we, among all the other animals, can use technology, starting with sticks and getting more complicated to AIs, technology to enhance our productivity so that we can achieve more with our time and therefore live better, longer, etc. That development of that surplus labor then leads to the conflict of man versus man, which is class society.
Yes.
Marx predicts, and this is what we've been saying the whole time in this episode, is that eventually there will be so much abundance produced by that class conflict that
it will be paradise. It will be paradise.
It will all be paradise. It will render class society superfluous, unnecessary, and what we will return to is the classic conflict, which is man versus nature. But with all of this we've created in the meantime to supplement our side of that dialectic, you look at what Marx considers to be primordial communism, which is tribal societies that don't have class structure. Everyone's organized into survival as in small tribes and groups, right? There's not much surplus to fight over, so people don't fight over it. This is like a attunement with nature that isn't the same thing as being a dumb animal, because humans do have this extra capability of creating value out of raw materials that other animals don't have. So we do that, but we do it as a share alike thing, and it brings us into a very intimate, unalienated relationship with nature. Mm-hmm. And this poem is predicting that will return once corporations are gone and commodities are gone and private property is gone, all this stuff is gone.
Right.
We go back to having our relationship with nature, but now mediated with the technology we've created, including AI in this case. The machines don't replace us as the masters of the planet. What they do is they free us from the labor that alienates us from nature, so we can go back to having this same type of relationship with each other and ourselves and the physical world around us.
Yeah, I mean, that is a much better interpretation of the poem than those two. I mean, he might be suggesting I think he was put on his heels by Ross being like, oh my God, it sounds terrible. But he might be he might know that this returning to nature is a result of like abundance, and he understands that technology can get us to abundance, but he might not be a Marxist.
No.
But honestly, if people can have get paid to do interviews on major platforms where they just misinterpret poetry, I feel like we should be able to get an invite here or there.
Well, I mean, Dootyhat's coming from a very religious
And
place.
conservative
religious place, which is, I think, is fascinating because it shows that as sophisticated as his thinking can be, he ultimately has some very like dogmatic assumptions about the
way the world is,
including the fact that like humans must remain fundamentally different than animals because that is our like moral value on the planet, and we have supremacy over animals, and that's an important like he needs to keep that and hold that. Which I thought that eating the apple was a sin, but apparently it's the source of all good things about the human race. So good on you, Eve, for making us eat that apple. I guess.
Who said that?
He said like he's bringing this up because he wants to. That apple is the religious symbology of our alienation from nature, and that we understood the world and our own mortality, and that this allowed us to have mastery over the animals and everything else. Like this was the fundamental.
But with some pretty big trade-offs, is my understanding.
Well, according to Dootyhat, like that.
Well, that's what
division is the most essential thing about the human race, and he sees Anthropic as threatening that.
I can understand why he thinks that. I can understand why he then sees Anthropic as the technology is threatening, because it's like if we're above the animals and someone can come in above us, like it's a very hierarchical and like not abundant way of thinking. But also I think he's saying that eating the apple is both the source of all good and all bad, and that's where I think he's at least tried.
Oh, I see.
Tried to draw it back to Dario. Like
he's saying that the AI is the apple.
AI might be the apple, and communism is the solution. Done and dusted.
Your powers will fade as you grow old. Your powers will fade as you grow old. Your powers will fade as you grow old.
I love you.